All right, so let's take a little bit of a look at the internet weather for the last week or so here. And the first item here is, we actually consistent with last week as well, bytes. This is bytes on source port 161 UDP. This is a simple network management protocol. You know, one of those things you probably should not see on the internet. If you're managing something over the internet, there's probably something wrong with that network architecture. But apparently there are a number of devices that are exposing this, more than I had actually anticipated. But this is evidence of basically distributed reflective denial of service attacks. There are a variety of targets here, so it's not just one target that's been sustained over time. And basically what it looks like is this has just been wrapped in with a lot of the other reflective attack capabilities that are being used for commercialized denial of service attacks right now.
Yeah. What I would say here, it doesn't surprise me. It's been around for years, or known about for years.
Yes.
You know, they started with DNS because, of course, there was plenty of open, reflectors to enable that. And so each one of these protocols has a different ability to amplify. So you've got to be able to reflect. That's key. But the amplification is really what makes the size of the attack, of course, go up. And NTP, for instance, has a decent amplification. And so each one of these protocols will have that. That's been some of the discussion around IPv6, because v6 allows for some pretty good amplification. The reason why Snmp has kind of been, the last, let's say, or towards the end in terms of, spoofable protocols is because the amplification is smaller.
Yep.
Now, why would they use Snmp as opposed to NTP DNS? Simple, because it's different. Right, and so everybody starts to get better at understanding how to defend against these, how to identify them, and typical attacker, right, change the attack, and we'll have a higher rate of success, at least initially. And so, can't say it surprises me that much because it's different. But yeah, I don't think you're going to see the massive sizes we saw with NTP reflection.
Yeah, I agree.
300, 400 gig is going to be hard to do, I think, with this protocol.
Well, two fundamental things with NTP. It had what was the monlist command, which was just really, had significant amplifications, which I think has been locked down to a large extent. That's helped a lot.
Yeah.
And there are an awful lot of devices that were exposing NTP that weren't intended to or needed to expose NTP at all. And I think the reason, one of the big there are two actually barriers in Snmp. One is that usually devices that have Snmp are operated by people that at least have a little bit of a clue. At least I'd like to think so. And so it tends to get disabled or blocked from the internet side more so. And then the second piece is the community string portion of this. If you want to get good amplification from it, you really need the community string to be able to get it to dump the MIB.
Right. Yeah.
And
you're
so
right. You don't have the issue with probably the zillion home routers.
Right. It's not a zillion
that
home
have
routers.
NTP.
Right.
On most of those things are not going to have Snmp.
I hope not.
Hope not.
The evidence here kind of suggests that there has been more.
Some of them do.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Dan, I was going to ask you, what do you think is the next protocol to be on the list?
One of the ones I think that actually had been prior to this, I think, was what is it? SSDP.
Yep.
Yeah.
We've seen that.
So I think actually this is one. Right. If we had been talking about SSDP, I would have said, "Oh, Snmp will be next." I don't have a grade for you after Snmp. Right? How many UDP protocols are there that are out there that are spoofable? And none's popping at the top of my mind unless you guys can think of one. But this, especially, they're going to allow you to have the amplification. Nothing's popping to mind.
Okay.
Well, and all of them have been a bit of a surprise. I wouldn't say surprise, because as your organization is doing, as ours as well, that is, you can start to see the really early indications of it being used, and then
you're totally right. I mean, we had a full year with the banks of the U.S. getting attacked with large attacks and application layer attacks, right? So if you had told me, oh, what will next year look like? I'd say, well, application attacks. And sure enough, the beginning of the year it was reflection amplification attacks.
Right.
So I think that's why more and more people have gotten away from these silly predictions around the holidays.
Oh, except for us.
We do that.
I like to call them trends. The trends are,
yes,
because that is.
Yeah, but well, even when we first noticed folks scanning for NTP, I wasn't sure that it had the amplification factor until I found out about monlist.
Right.
That was the one that gave it the huge amplification.
That was the magic in a sense. Yep.
Now I'm thinking some weekend, get a whole bunch of Red Bull and a whole bunch of RFCs, and just start reading and see if there's something in there that jumps out at me.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple folks out there that do scanning of the internet, and yeah, start keeping track of those projects, and it always surprises you. I remember H.D. Moore did a talk one time where he was talking about a project like that, and the amount of NT4 machines he found did not surprise me. Right, the amount of NT351 machines he found did surprise me.
That's it. Well, you don't need to patch those.
No.
They didn't have patches, and so you don't need to patch them, right?
You take them out behind the...
Well, that was an interesting move. Maybe you guys have already discussed this. Microsoft talking about free upgrades, to 10, right? And so the issue becomes, wow, that's a great idea. Except for the fact, can that OS actually run on the system that's running this older OS?
Well,
right.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
From a PR standpoint, brilliant.
Yeah.
Good job, Microsoft. Yeah. From a real-world application standpoint, can my old machine even run your new OS? And that's, I think, going to be the challenge.
My 286
we'll have to
is
see
out
how
of
many
the closet and see.
Well, also a great way to get people to buy brand new Windows machines.
Yeah, no, I mean, if that's
If
the
they
goal,
do,
then
yeah.
great too. Yeah, but you're right. I mean, from us being security practitioners, we're like, wow, that's a big win. Until you realize, oh, wow, a lot of those machines probably can't be upgraded, and we're still stuck with them.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how many takers there are there, because I was kind of speculating myself that is, if I take that upgrade, what do they learn about me? And not from my point of view. I haven't pirated my software, but this for folks that aren't already aware of this, Microsoft has offered the speculation at the very least is that I think about 2/3 of the machines in China use pirated software, and so they're offering a free upgrade so that they can get the updates into place, and presumably that's a good security measure to put into place. But the question is,
it sounds very
how many will take it?
altruistic, and hey, good job, Microsoft, and.
We'll see how it works out.
Yeah, exactly. That'll
hope
be the
it's
question,
successful.
right? It's a good marketing move, maybe it ends up being a good security move. But you're right. It's a question of how many people can actually do that, and does it solve anything? If not, it was still a good marketing move.
Absolutely. All right. Next item here is the next, actually the most probed ports, and not a whole lot of movement here. Most of these we've been talking about. We'll take a little closer look at port 135. We talked about that last week, and it's getting back to its old self again. The biggest movement here is actually port 8888, which moved up 64 spots in terms of our ranking. So we'll take a little bit of a look at that one as well. First of all, port 8888. This one actually is associated with a couple of different applications: New Edge Gaming, Solaris Answer Book. We were discussing how old Solaris Answer Book is. I actually had seen a vulnerability back from I think it was from 2000, where they had an authentication bypass. I don't think they're targeting Solaris Answer Book here. That's just me.
I think that's a good gamble. You can place your bets on that one.
There are actually there are some proxy applications that default to this port. So my suspicion is that they're searching around for some proxies, most likely for anonymizing activity. And by the way, most of the sources, there are several sources here, most of them coming from China. Next item, as I mentioned, port 135 TCP. This is a DC endpoint resolution associated with Microsoft. Actually, I think it shows, I'm showing 90 days here. It's actually not 90 days of data that we're looking at. I think we're just looking at 30 days. But the significance being, last week what we had reported is basically activity where the activity had dropped off significantly, and now it's kind of coming back to where it was before. Again, the same addresses that are doing this. It's around, on the order of about 200 addresses, all associated with the same registration, Chinese registered addresses. But it appears that they might be actually hosted somewhere outside of China. So not necessarily hosted from China, but registered to China. And then looking at activity for port 23, I only bring this up not because it shows up in the top 10 lists, but because it actually has dropped down a little bit. Still some significant probing activity on this port, and we had talked about the Internet of Insecure Things. This is the magical port that gets into an awful lot of those devices that expose port 23 to the internet, and oftentimes have default passwords associated with them that the owners of the devices didn't even know about in many cases. In any case, we're at the actually lowest level since Thanksgiving in terms of the probing activity on a hourly basis. So I'm conservatively or carefully putting my thumbs, I'll put my thumbs halfway up here. This is generally a good sign, but I don't think it's because there's been a fundamental improvement in the security of things at this point. Looking at the most sources doing that probing, we have at the top of the list here port 445. We haven't seen that for a while, and it's back. It had been port 23, and as I said, we've seen a drop in the activity on port 23, so 445 came back. They're actually, and I was going to show a graph of it, but it wasn't actually as compelling as I had hoped here. But there actually has been a little bit of an upward bump in the number of sources that are probing on port 445, which is I'm not sure what to make of that. I don't think it's, most of this is basically conficker infections that still are basically sitting out there and doing their probing activities. The fact there's a little bit of an increase here, I don't know exactly. That could be maybe even just a routing change or something that's causing that. It's hard to say. As I said, port 23 followed by, we looked at that, and then some of these others are actually associated with PDP gaming activity, and we also see 1900 down here. We talked about that simple service delivery discovery protocol call used in reflection attacks. And this is a case where what it looks like is, this is a case where the source, a spoof source, is there are packets going out, and it looks like it's going to many places, so it shows up there perhaps as scanning activity. And if there are a lot of sources that are getting attacked or targets of attack, it basically shows up as in this report.